What is the purpose of this expedition? Well, we're going to an island called Zavodovski Island. This is the northernmost island of the South Sandwich Islands in the southern Atlantic. It's in the Antarctic realm, so it's a really cold, very windy and very stormy place. It's meant to be the stormiest place on our planet. And it has never ever been surveyed for any terrestrial life. So we don't know about the plants, we don't know about the animals that live on this island. The only information we have is from an expedition that happened in 1997, where one of my colleagues from the British Antarctic Survey spent a total of 3 hours on this island. So for me, as a terrestrial ecologist and as a plant scientist, as a lichenologist and as someone who is generally interested in ecosystems in polar regions, I'm going to find out what life we will find on this very, very remote island. What I hope to find, I really don't know. I hope to find wildlife in abundance, but I'm not sure what to expect. So I'm going with a very open mind, with a very opportunistic sampling kit, and I will see what I can do while I'm on this very special place. I'm very nervous, I'm anxious. There's my own personal anxiety about being on the sailing yacht for the first time. How am I going to feel? Will I be very seasick? Will everything go well on our journey? About going to a place for the first time. I've never been there, I don't know what to expect, I don't know how it will be being in a tent, being with my colleagues in a confined space. So there's my personal anxiety, but there's also concerns about the wildlife, concerns about the animals, and that's mostly because of the bird flu. So the bird flu, which we know now has caused havoc and devastation in bird populations all across the planet, has just made it to Antarctica. And that makes me very concerned. That makes me feel very uncomfortable about our trip. Not only because we might get to Zavodovski and find devastation in the chinstrap and macaroni penguin populations, but also because we don't know what impact our own research will have. Will we be carriers? Will we bring the disease to the island? We hope not. We have all biosecurity measurements in place, but we don't know what will happen. So what I do, I try to stay positive. I think about the well-organized trip, about all the security and health and safety protocols that we have in place. And I just hope that when we arrive, we will find teeming wildlife. We will find populations that are still healthy, and we will see what happens if that's not the case. But there's a big chance that everything is going well, and I will just try to keep that positive thought for now. From here in Stanley, we will take a sailing yacht, which will take us to South Georgia first. South Georgia is about 250 sea miles from here, and then we will venture from there to Zavodovski Island, which will take us in total about 6 days of sailing. I'm very excited.
What was it like on the boat?
Hard. That's mostly because my body didn't function well. I was just feeling seasick most of the time, and I had to take medicine, which was affecting my awareness quite a lot. I always felt 100% safe on the boat. The crew was incredibly professional. It was at no point where I thought, okay, this trip is actually risky. I always felt in very, very good hands. But the fact that I felt sick at the same time, most of the time, made it a very exhausting trip physically.
After 14 instead of 5 very long days and nights on board of the Vincent of Antarctica, we finally arrived on Zavodovski Island today. Look at this! It's really very windy. We cannot get ashore, so we have anchored just before the island, and we will try to get on land tomorrow. I'll take the camera around, give you a good look. So you see the volcano, surrounding ash plain. You get a good impression for the weather and how it feels to be out here. Tomorrow we will go ashore trying to set up some tents.
So we arrive on Zavodovski, we set up our camp, we are very proud. We spent the first night, and in that night a really bad storm is hitting the island. And that storm was so strong that it shredded our tents. It shredded the flies of the tents. So we had to take all the equipment to a safe site, set up a new set of tents, backup tents, in a completely different place in the middle of the storm, carrying all the equipment. And it was very, very extreme, very, very extreme. And it took us a full day to just rescue our equipment, rescue ourselves, and re-establish a new campsite. That was quite something.
Hello! So today we are in the northern part of the island. We've walked about 2 hours to get to this point. We are here in the middle of the big penguin colony, and I want to introduce you to my colleague John Dickens, who is here as a penguin biologist, and he will tell us what he is doing here today. Hello, John!
Hi, Claudia. So I'm currently flying a drone over this enormous penguin colony. Collect hundreds of images, thousands of images, and stitch all of those together and create a really high resolution map. And from that map, we can then count the number of penguins.
Do you have an estimate how many nesting pairs are here at the moment?
More than 10. I think the estimate, which I think is quite a wild estimate, I think there's meant to be about 600,000 pairs. There's 1.2 million penguins on the island. Wow. I think that's the estimate that's given. But this will give us a much clearer idea and a really highly accurate count.
In terms of the biodiversity for the South Sandwich Islands, they are a white spot on the map. We know nothing about the terrestrial life, and we also know very little about the microbial diversity. It's especially interesting because it's mostly warm soils on Zavodovski, so geothermal soils that are warmed up by the volcanic activity. And we know that they host very rare communities of soil microbes. So I've taken these samples as well, and I brought them back to the lab, and they will be analyzed and hopefully help us understand how early life on our planet could form. Maybe the biggest surprise for what we found on the trip was a really, really big patch of moss. Originally, our expectation was that every life on Zavodovski would be sandblasted out of existence. And we knew from the initial report that there were only just a few shoots of a single moss species on the ash plain. But what we found instead was a big patch of moss, probably 100 square meters big. And that was a really, really big surprise to see that. It's just a single species. It's a well-known species too, but the fact that it was there, and it was there in such an abundance, that was a real surprise. My most favorite memory of the island was the king penguin chick. That is so special because talking to biologists before, everyone said they cannot imagine that a king penguin could survive the winter in Zavodovski, because the chicks are actually on their own during the winter and the parents feed at sea. So if there was a king penguin chick, it would have to withstand this wind and storm all the way through the winter on its own. So when we came to this island and there was this bird in such a beauty, full its feathers and wonderful, happy and healthy, that was just the best thing I've seen on the island. It was so good.
If you could go back, would you?
No. No. I mean, I really love the Antarctic work and I really like doing this. But the fact that this was associated with this really long sail trip that made me feel so bad physically, I don't think I would do this kind of trip again. I'd love to go back to the Antarctic, but using a different mode of transport.